All right, so the final part of the pH and the relationship of sodium potassium to the pH. So they're both alkaline minerals, and there's in the metabolic typing system, I'm going to confuse you, but there's a certain type of protein type that they do too much potassium, it turns into an acid. But generally potassium doesn't transmute to an acid in most people, it's an alkaline mineral. So if your potassium levels are high, like we talked about in the lab work, your potassium in your blood work's relatively high and your sodium is relatively low, then you may see a pH problem in that person because the kidney, adrenals, and the lungs regulate pH. So that would be your marker to look into, hey, let's check your saliva and urine pH. But generally, if your sodium potassium numbers are both low on your hair mineral analysis and in your blood work, then you know that you might have an acid problem because your alkaline mineral buffers are low. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And if your sodium and potassium levels are way too high, which I just have a new hair mineral analysis where they are, I mean, all the minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, even all of them except for iron, they're all elevated. So she might have actually a pH regulation or an alkalinity problem. Too much alkaline minerals. And so what's the couple of the control elements? They flashed through earlier when we looked at the PowerPoint. I'll go back to it. Sodium potassium pump. Oh, pH was the one. So see, there's your, so the ones on the right control the ones on the left, and the ones on the left control the ones on the right. You could think they want to pair together. These elements, they want to pair together. Mm-hmm. Sodium chloride, potassium chloride, right? So if you're too alkaline, then apple cider vinegar is a good remedy. And they even say eat more meat, eat more phosphorus rich foods, eat more soaked grains and drink that water is an easy way to get more phosphorus is soak your grains and drink the soaked grain water, very high in phosphorus. That's the part of phytic acid. You know, they talk about phytates. Well, all phytates are is this phytic acid, this phosphorus compound that's bound up to a mineral. Magnesium phytate, calcium phytate, sodium phytate. That's what they're saying. When you see an ATE, when we go through the chemistry module, this will all make more sense. But when you see lactate or these acids that turn into an acid salt, that means it's the acid bound to an alkaline mineral. Magnesium lactate is lactic acid bound to magnesium. So Anna, just to finish Anna's query, this is where I have it on recording is, yes, you could use your nutraceutical amino acids, your nutraceutical vitamins, and your nutraceutical whatever's for short term. Definitely, if the person's really struggling and you need to get their attention very quick, yeah, then you might use some amino acids, but you want to make sure that you're not triggering an immune response also. So you'd probably want to check their lab work and make sure their digestion and lab work's working.
Yeah. So for people that are vegan, is it possible to get them, amino acids through foods?
The two best things I found for vegans are nutritional yeast, brewer's yeast, and bee pollen.
Vegans won't do bee stuff, right?
Some people won't do bee, yeah, they won't. Yeah. The other one is ribonucleic acid, RNA products. A lot of companies make them, and Standard Process has one that's the RNA is isolated from yeast, so it's vegan. So ribonucleic acid is another great vegan alternative that if they're adamant. So what you want to do if they're adamant is just remind them of climate. There's a slide that we're going to go over at some point where it talks about colder climate, you need to have more protein and fat. Warmer climate, climate, less protein and fat. So the vegan, then they've got to make sure they've got enough protein and fat sources, because if they're trying to be a vegan in Seattle, like this one, it's like running a race and tying a ball and chain to your leg while you're running a race. It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
Just like it doesn't make any sense to be a big steak eater in the climate that Isabel is in right now. Do you want to have a big fatty juicy steak on a 95-degree day with 95% relative humidity? No, you're not going to want to eat that.
Which is ironic, because this country, this part of the country is very heavy on meat production, right?
So
I wanted to ask
Go
you
ahead.
though, Craig. So you said when sodium potassium is low, both markers are low, then it could lead to pH level showing acidity, and when it's both high, then alkalinity. What is if we have this, what we often see, that the potassium is very high and the sodium is low?
Then you know that you have a potentially adrenal fatigue, and you've got to look at, because the adrenals the adrenals are right on top of the kidneys. And so if the adrenals are fatigued, you want to look at yourself and say, are the kidneys also fatigued? And if they are, how is mineral regulation going? And so they could be either too alkaline or too acidic. You don't know until you actually start looking at some more data.
Okay.
They will probably, you'd have to look at that. And in the lab work then, what is the easiest way to tell how they're doing with their pH in their blood? It's right there in all lab work. If I give Monica this clue, she'll get it right away. So I don't want to give the clue.
pH in the blood.
Ask the question again.
What is the one thing on lab work that could tell you, it tells you almost immediately, well, there's actually two things that tells you almost immediately how the pH is in the body, in the bloodstream at least, and the lungs. Ah, shit, I gave it away. Cindy Toon talks about this. That's your
Oh,
clue.
breath. Okay.
And what are we trying to recycle with the breath?
The O2.
Oh,
CO2.
the CO2.
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 I'm going to talk about that today. It ties in with this, the mitochondrial stuff. I'm going to show you guys some on another recording. So CO2 is regulated via the breath. So if your CO2 levels are off outside of the range of 24 to 28, then, if it's too high, I think it's alkalosis, too alkaline. And if it's too low, I think it's acidity. But you can look at the lab work part for that. And then the chloride levels in the blood. You'll always see the chloride levels in the blood. So excessive chloride is acidity, and not enough chloride is alkalinity. So that'll tell you right away. If you see high potassium, low sodium, then go to CO2 and chloride and see what those are doing. Is your first assumption. See if you're getting any clues there. And then if you need a hair mineral analysis, that can tell you some things. But I would go right into you guys. Get me some urine and saliva pH readings and get them in the morning and before bed, and maybe even before and after meals. There should be an alkaline surge after you eat. Why? The body should become much more alkaline after you eat, about a half hour after. Why? What's happening in the stomach?
Stomach acid. Yeah, the stomach acid's being used, and it's then in the process of allowing your body's in the process of allowing the nutrients to get into your system, so you don't have as much stomach acid because you don't need to eat. You just ate.
Okay, I'm gonna do a whiteboard.
No,
This will make a lot. I'll just do please don't make fun of my human.
Craig, can you spell Cindy's last name? You said Cindy Toon?
Toone.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Let's do a sort of rectangular human here. So there's the head's slightly askew. Don't make fun of me. And then we got to draw a stomach. So we'll do a little red. So here's the stomach here. Got a big stomach.
Yes.
And we better
Big
label
as a head.
there. ST, stomach. Okay, so we won't do any arms and legs. The poor guys, you know, we have a real problem with no arms and legs, but they just ate. So you have HCl, HCl, right? And that's going into the stomach, right?
Mhm.
So when there's food in there, then let's say your pH normally in the urine, pH urine equals, let's say it's 6.5 normally. So what does acidity mean? What's there more of, H or OH? When you're acidic, we kind of just looked at it.
H or OH? I'm sorry, I'm not even coming up with
So,
what OH is.
pH is low equals acidic
Yes,
equals excess H ions.
okay.
And in this case, after meals equals H plus Cl ions, right? Stomach acid is HCl. So you have all these extra H ions, oops, H plus, that go in after a meal, after we eat, see, to acidify the stomach. Then by default, the rest of the body has less H. And rest of body after eating
Oh,
equals the alkaline tide post-meal. We're talking ideally here.
mhm.
So you would see, you know, there'd be a good way to make a little animation of this. You could show like, I actually could do it. That's actually a good idea. A little animation to show, here's the body, and to show all the H ions in the body, and then show them in the stomach, and there's less in the rest of the body. And then by default, then the urine is a good one to measure, because the urine will change very quickly, the saliva not so much so. And you'll see your normal urine pH of 6.5, it'll go up to 7.5 after you eat. So that's the point. In these people, if they can't get an alkaline tide after they eat, what does that mean?
The system is broken down and not doing the correct exchange. So they don't have full forces to digest, as well as, you know, have their body in balance. Because there must be other good things that happen if your hydrogen is not in your pee and the rest of your body. It must be that it's even, you know, other things that allow. So it's
Yeah,
always,
they don't have enough HCl.
Right, so they didn't shuttle enough hydrogen ions and chloride ions into the stomach. They're staying in the rest of the body, which means the body's not going to become alkaline. Why? Because the body didn't shuttle them in.
Yeah.
Now, the question that begs to be asked about this is, why is the body not shuttling in hydrogen ions? Because it knows it needs to. So why is it not doing it? You guys want me to save this whiteboard? Is this worthy of saving?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, we might have to add more to it to make it really clear, but yeah, it's a great start.
It doesn't have the resources to do it.
I will do this in a PowerPoint, you guys. That's actually what I promised. So I will promise to do a PowerPoint on this.
Yeah, and your image idea of showing the body with hydrogen and chloride out in them before eating, and then they leave the tissue surrounding the stomach and go more into the stomach, you know, that's very useful to imagine.
Let me get that written down here. So we're being recorded. So
Mhm.
I'm going to pause this second. So this is part 2, folks. I'll probably be able to splice them together later, but this was the second part of our pH discussion. Now, Isabel, do you feel complete?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so H ions after meal alkaline tide chart.
Thank you.
Tide chart.
But you said it's both H and chloride.
Yes, plus Cl. Yeah.
Yeah, both of them.
So make.
That's a great image to know that they're out free floating in the rest of our tissue, but when we eat, they're going to hopefully